Welcome to this video on safe to fail experiments. Safe to fail experiments are a wonderful way to respond to the challenges of complex times. Now, many people have written about complexity and creating change in the context of complexity, but there's one particular text I want to acknowledge right now when we get started in this video, and that's by a book by Berger and Johnston called Simple Habits for Complex Times. And in that book, they make reference to safe to fail experiments. Now, they're not the only people to talk about small groups working on challenges, but I love the way they title these experiments, and I'm going to use that terminology from them. First of all, before we get into the details of the experiments themselves, I need to answer the question, why safe to fail experiments? Well, the answer is, in short, because the alternative doesn't work. So instead of small localized experiments where people are coming together and working on something and learning while they do it, the alternative has been big rolled out programs that have been intended to create widespread organizational change. Well, less than 20% of those, in fact more like 15%, have actually been successful. Research has been done over and over looking at the success stats for these large rolled out training programs and other change initiatives. Very few of them work. And there's multiple reasons why that is the case. But one of the critical things that determines failure for those approaches is that they don't take into account that we're working in a complex environment. On the graphic here, you'll notice that there's fantastic distinctions to be made between a simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic environment. And organizational change can be located fair and square in the complex environment. That's a complex change. So what does that mean? It means that it's not a case of getting best practice and rolling it out right throughout the organization. It generally doesn't work. In fact, and in complex environments, what we know is that you'll never really know a tight fit between cause and effect. It's too complex. It's trying to figure out, why do we have a cool weather system at the moment? Where did that come from? I mean, it's so the causes can come from so many different places on the earth. It would be crazy to think that you can put your finger on why a certain localized weather pattern happened. It's the same with changing complex systems in organizations. You don't know cause and effect. In fact, to learn about the system, you act on it. And safe to fail experiments is one way to do that. You act on your system and learn while you do it. So safe to fail experiments is an alternative to the big widespread rollouts, which have been shown to be ineffective. And safe to fail experiments are a very powerful way of responding and scaling learning up across an organization. Scaling learning right up. Small groups learning like mad, implementing localized responses to challenges they're experiencing. Okay, so I've said enough about background. There's more that could be said, but now I want to go to the guidelines for choosing what might be a good safe to fail experiment. The first guideline is it has to be doable. I mean doable by you, the small group that's running a safe to fail experiment. I'd suggest that that would be a group no bigger than 6 to 8 people, chooses an experiment that they can do. They've got the resources available to them to act on it, and they can do it. The second point is it has to be safe to fail. That is, no bad thing's going to happen if it goes awry. So we don't want them to be fooling around with key organizational processes that run right down the skeleton or the spine of the organization if in fact something bad's going to happen if it fails. These experiments are best thought to be on the edges or on the perimeters of the organization, not in the first place challenging core processes that if your experiment fails, lots of bad stuff's going to happen. So make it safe. It's got to be safe to fail. Third thing, it's an experiment where you can gather information in the context of the experiment and learn from it. So you'll need to be able to figure out how can we determine if this experiment, what our action's doing and if it's working or not. So before you do it, consider what data you'll be able to collect while you're doing it. The fourth thing is start small. These experiments should be small, finely grained, pragmatic, cheap. Little experiments done in the part of the organization where your living, probably most likely, and that it doesn't have to be a big project. And what I mean by small is also a project that can be completed in 3 to 8 weeks. We don't want some 6-month-long thing. We want something done in 2 months or less. So start small. So that's the guidelines for choosing the safe to fail experiments. Now the final thing, the guidelines for enacting them. Guidelines for enacting them. First guideline is take the mindset of laughter and fun and lightness. So these are experiments which are going to be fun to do, not serious. Not like the world's relying upon you to come up with the answer. Bring up a light mindset. The second guideline for enacting will be choose experiments that go in all different directions. So if you've got an experiment that wants to see whether morale is lifted by doing a particular activity in an organization, in a particular department, you might like to do an experiment which does exactly the opposite. So choose experiments that consciously contradict themselves. And so that you can learn more by observing what happens. Third guideline for enacting is be neighbourly. Now, what do I mean by this? I love the way Berger and Johnson talk about this. They choose experiments which you don't think are necessarily to the core of the problem, but maybe a little bit to the edge of it. In complex systems, we think we know what the core problem is, but we're rarely right. And even acting on the core problem will not necessarily bring about the change you want. Acting neighbourly might. So look to engage in experiments that you think could be a bit peripheral in their impact, but might surprise you. Okay, fourth guideline is make your team diverse. Choose people with different kinds of personality typings, different levels of the organisations, genders. Make it heterogeneous, make it diverse, and that's going to make your learning richer, quicker. Finally, learn like mad. The more you can learn, the faster you'll be able to create your change and grow as you do it. Okay, that's it. We've covered the background, we've covered the guidelines for choosing, we've covered the guidelines for enacting. Let's go do it. Thanks very much. Bye.